Before you listen to this story, please turn off the lights in your room or make them very dim. Put your phone down, get comfortable, and let your body relax. Take a slow, deep breath, then gently let it go. You do not need to think about your day anymore. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. Just listen calmly and let my voice guide you. This story is not meant to excite your mind, but to help it slow down. Allow your thoughts to fade, your breathing to become steady, and your body to feel heavy and safe. As the story begins, you can simply rest and slowly drift toward peaceful sleep. In this long, calming history story designed especially for sleep, we will slowly and gently explore the many quiet, everyday hardships faced by medieval knights, the constant weight of heavy armor pressing on their bodies from morning until night, the relentless discomfort from extreme heat or bitter cold trapped inside metal plates, the endless itching from fleas and lice that no amount of scratching could fully relieve, the sore muscles and aching joints from hours of training and long rides in the saddle, the poor sleep on hard straw mattresses in drafty castles, the simple and often upsetting food, the rare baths and constant grime, and all those small, persistent pains that filled their lives, while the world only remembered their moments of glory on the battlefield or in tournaments. Before you allow this soft, steady voice to guide you gently toward sleep, take a quiet moment to make your surroundings as peaceful and comfortable as possible. Dim the lights slowly, or turn them off completely, letting a soothing darkness settle around you like a warm embrace. Lie down or sit in your favorite relaxing spot, letting your head rest softly on the pillow, your body sink deeply into the mattress or chair, and your blanket cover you with just the right gentle weight. Set your phone aside now, far enough that it no longer calls for your attention. There is truly nothing more you need to do tonight. Take one slow, deep breath in. Feel the air fill your chest calmly. Hold it softly for a moment, then release it even more slowly, letting all the air flow out like a quiet sigh of complete relief. Let your shoulders loosen and drop. Your arms and legs grow pleasantly heavy. Your whole body relax deeper with every breath. Any thoughts or worries from the day can simply drift away now. They are not needed here. Just listen peacefully to my calm voice, allowing the slow words to wash over you, helping your mind unwind. Your breathing becomes slower and more even, and your body feels safe, heavy, and ready to drift naturally into deep, restful sleep whenever it wishes. Imagine now, very gently, and without any hurry, that we are traveling quietly back through time to the 14th century, to the misty green countryside of England or France, where tall stone castles stand proudly on hillsides surrounded by thick forests and winding rivers, and where the air carries the faint scent of wood smoke from hearth fires and the distant lowing of cattle in the fields. And as the first pale light of dawn begins to creep slowly through the narrow arrow-slit windows of a bedchamber high in one of those gray stone towers, our knight Sir Edmund stirs awake on his simple bed of wooden frame and straw-filled mattress covered only by a wool blanket and perhaps a fur in colder months, and though he is a strong man in his mid-30s, trained since boyhood to bear hardship without complaint, his body already reminds him of yesterday's efforts with a familiar dull ache in the lower back from long hours spent in the saddle, stiffness in the shoulders from swinging heavy practice weapons, and a lingering soreness in knees and ankles from carrying the full weight of armor all day long. For sleep in a medieval castle was rarely deep, or truly restorative, because the thin straw mattress rustled with every small movement. Drafts of cold air slipped constantly through cracks in the stone walls, no matter how brightly the fire burned downstairs in the great hall. And the ever-present threat of sudden alarm or raid meant that nights learned to sleep lightly, always half ready to leap up at the sound of a horn or the creak of the gate, and on many nights vivid dreams or quiet worries about upcoming tournaments, border skirmishes, or the safety of family lands disturbed what little rest was possible, leaving Sir Edmund and knights like him feeling weary even before the new day had properly begun. And as he rises slowly, stretching carefully to ease the tightness in his muscles, he feels the chill of the morning air on his linen shirt and wool hose. The only garments he slept in, and his feet touch the cold stone floor that sends a shiver up his legs, until he pulls on soft leather shoes or slippers if the castle is wealthy enough to provide them. And then comes the first true daily trial that every knight knew so well, the long process of arming himself for the day ahead, for a full suit of plate armor, even when beautifully crafted with shining steel plates over flexible chainmail, weighed anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds depending on its quality and completeness. And though clever design distributed that weight across shoulders, waist, hips, and thighs so that a fit knight could move and even run short distances if needed, it remained a constant, unrelenting burden that pressed down hour after hour from early morning until evening, and dressing required the patient help of his squire, a young lad learning the ways of knighthood, who would first bring the thick, padded arming doublet made of layers of linen or wool stuffed with cotton or horsehair to cushion the skin against the hard metal that would soon cover it. And this garment alone felt warm and slightly restrictive, even in cool weather, tying snugly around the torso and arms. And next came the heavy chainmail hauberk, a long shirt woven from tens of thousands of small iron rings that weighed 20 pounds or more on its own, and lifting it over the head, let the full weight settle immediately onto the padded shoulders with a familiar heaviness that would stay there all day, and the tiny rings shifted gently with every movement, sometimes pinching skin or pulling hair if not perfectly smooth underneath. And then piece by careful piece the solid plate armor was strapped on, the breastplate and backplate buckled tightly across the chest, so breathing felt a little more effortful, large curved pauldrons protecting the shoulders and adding noticeable weight there, vambraces and re-braces guarding the arms, cuisses for the thighs, greaves wrapping the shins, and sabatons for the feet if riding into potential danger, and each leather strap was pulled firm, each buckle fastened securely so nothing shifted dangerously during movement, and finally, the heavy helmet was placed ready nearby, its padded lining and narrow visor waiting to enclose the head in a world of muffled sound and limited vision. And once the entire suit was complete, Sir Edmund could feel the familiar pressure everywhere, across the chest with every breath, down the spine, on hips and thighs when standing still, and especially on the shoulders where so much weight rested. And even simple actions like walking across the chamber or descending spiral stone stairs became slower and more deliberate because every step carried that extra load, and mounting a horse required a smooth, practiced motion to swing the armored leg over the saddle without losing balance. And throughout the day, whether training in the castle yard, riding on patrol along muddy forest tracks, or simply standing guard during a lord's audience, The armor never let the body forget its presence. Pressing, warming, restricting, tiring. And in summer, when the sun rose higher and beat down on the polished steel surfaces, the metal absorbed heat quickly and relentlessly until the night became like a living oven inside. Sweat beginning to form within minutes and soon pouring down the back, soaking the padded doublet until it clung coldly when the breeze touched it, running into eyes behind the visor and making them sting, collecting in the gloves until fingers felt slippery on reins or sword hilt, and the air inside the closed helmet grew thick and humid with every breath, so that many knights would raise the visor whenever safety allowed just to feel cooler air on their flushed faces. But during drills or patrols, the visor stayed down and breathing felt labored in that warm, enclosed space, and in heavy summer rain, the experience changed but offered no real relief because water trickled through every tiny gap and joint to mix with sweat inside, making padding sodden and even heavier. And when the rain stopped, the damp layers stayed cold against skin for hours afterward, chilling the body despite the warm air outside. And in winter, the armor became a conductor of cold instead, with biting winds finding every seam between plates and seeping through the mail rings to numb fingers inside metal gauntlets until they ached deeply, toes growing stiff and painful inside steel sabatons. No matter how much straw was stuffed into boots for insulation, and breath fogged constantly inside the helmet, sometimes freezing in white frost along the edges of the visor. And nights on long winter patrols wrapped extra wool scarves around necks and faces, but still returned to the castle with red, raw skin and joints that throbbed from the deep chill. And beyond weather, there was the constant issue of hygiene, which was perhaps one of the quietest, yet most persistent daily torments, because full bathing was a rare event requiring many buckets of water heated laboriously over kitchen fires and poured into a wooden tub, usually possible only once a week or even less often when the castle was busy or on campaign. So most days Sir Edmund, like other knights, washed only face, neck, hands, and perhaps arms with cold water from a basin and a rough cloth, using a small piece of harsh soap made from animal fat and wood ashes if any was available, and sometimes pleasant-smelling herbs like dried lavender, rosemary, or mint leaves were added to the water for a brief fresh scent, but these could not prevent the steady buildup of sweat, dust, and grime beneath the many layers of padded clothing and armor worn day after day. And the thick arming doublet and wool garments absorbed everything until they grew stiff and sour, and washing them properly again required time and warm water that was often not available, so skin became irritated in warm creases of arms, groin, and neck. Small rashes formed and itched quietly, and worse still were the ever-present fleas and lice that infested straw mattresses, wool blankets, fur cloaks, and especially the thick padded gambeson itself, tiny creatures that bit without warning at any exposed or thinly covered skin and hid deep in seams where they were almost impossible to remove completely. And once a garment or bed was infested, the itching became a constant companion, especially in places unreachable while armored, such as the middle of the back or under the arms, where a knight might shift uncomfortably in the saddle for hours, unable to scratch properly through layers of mail and plate, gaining only brief relief in the evening when armor was finally removed and fingers could reach the spots. But by morning the creatures were ready to bite again, and fleas carried by rats in castle walls or campgrounds sometimes brought more serious illness. With outbreaks of plague always a distant but real shadow that claimed even the strongest warriors without mercy. And meals, though better than those of common peasants, still brought their own small discomforts, because while a knight in his lord's castle might enjoy fresh-baked bread, ale, roasted venison, or mutton, cheeses, and occasional apples or cooked vegetables from the garden, on patrol or campaign food became plain and repetitive, with hard, twice-baked bread that wore the teeth, heavily salted pork or beef that turned rancid in warm weather, dried peas or beans boiled into thick pottage, and water from roadside streams that was often muddy or polluted by villages upstream, leading to stomach cramps or longer bouts of illness that made long days in armor even harder to bear. And the heavy, fatty diet, combined with much physical exertion, frequently caused bloating or digestive upset that added another layer of quiet discomfort during rides or training. And the training itself filled many hours of most days and was always exhausting, because in the castle tilting, yard knights charged again and again at the quintain, or at each other, with blunted lances and swords while wearing full armor to build endurance. And every gallop down the lists jolted the body in the saddle. Every swing of the heavy practice sword burned arm and shoulder muscles. Lungs worked harder inside the confined helmet as sweat poured freely. And even when no serious injury occurred, the repeated impacts left bruises blooming purple under padding and a deep fatigue that settled into bones by evening. And long patrols along borderlands or escort duties meant many consecutive hours rocking in the saddle over rough, uneven tracks, where the constant up and down motion wore on spine and hips until the lower back ached. Steadily, leather saddle and padding pressed the same spots until skin grew raw despite thick hose. Legs swelled slightly inside greaves by late afternoon, and mud from the road splashed up to cake lower armor, adding yet more weight that squires would later spend hours cleaning to prevent rust. And when night finally arrived and armor was removed piece by piece, the body felt strangely light, yet deeply tired, muscles trembling slightly from the day's load, skin pale and marked with red lines where straps and plates had pressed, and rest came on the same straw mattress harboring the same insects, in rooms shared with other knights or retainers, where snoring, coughing, or the creak of floorboards disturbed light sleep, and the knowledge that the morrow would bring the same routine again kept true relaxation just out of reach, so that Sir Edmund and countless knights like him carried these accumulated small sufferings day after day in stoic silence, because the code of chivalry demanded not only courage in battle, but quiet endurance in all things. And few songs or stories ever spoke of the weight that never fully lifted, the itch that never fully stopped, the chill or heat that lingered in the bones, the fatigue from broken nights, the worry of illness or injury always waiting. As the days gently turned into weeks, and those weeks slowly flowed into months, and the months quietly accumulated into years, and then decades of unwavering service to lord and land, these small, persistent, everyday hardships became not just occasional trials, but the very fabric and steady, unchanging rhythm of Sir Edmund's entire life, woven so deeply and completely into every waking hour, and even into the broken patterns of his sleep, that he rarely paused anymore to name them separately or dwell upon them. because the constant weight of the armor had long since become as familiar and inseparable as the slow, steady beat of his own heart or the quiet rise and fall of his breath, pressing down without pause on shoulders that had grown broad and strong to bear it, on hips that had learned to shift balance almost without thought, on chest and back, where the breastplate and backplate hugged tightly with every inhaled breath, making each one feel just a little more deliberate and effortful. And even when the heavy plates were finally removed in the evening and carefully hung on their stand in the armory, the body still remembered the load because the muscles carried a deep, lingering fatigue that settled slowly into the bones like a thick mist rolling in from the sea. The joints held subtle aches that did not fully fade overnight. The skin retained faint red lines and pale indented marks where leather straps and metal edges had pressed hour after hour, day after day, year after year. And though Sir Edmund remained a strong and capable knight well into his later years, there were now many quiet evenings when he would ease himself carefully onto a wooden bench beside the great hall fire, feeling the deep weariness spread through every limb so completely that even the simple motion of lifting a plain wooden cup filled with watered ale to his dry lips required a small, conscious effort, and the minor pains that had always greeted him upon waking each morning, that familiar dull tightness across the lower back from countless hours spent rocking gently but relentlessly in the saddle over rough, uneven forest tracks and muddy roads, the steady throb in both shoulders from repeatedly swinging heavy practice swords or couched lances during long training sessions, the quiet tenderness in knees and ankles from bearing the full, unrelenting weight of polished steel plate from dawn until dusk. These pains no longer vanished completely by midday, as they once had when he was younger and recovery came swiftly, but instead lingered softly and persistently throughout the day, sometimes growing a little deeper as the seasons turned and the years passed, because old bruises now took longer to fade beneath the padding. Old minor twists or strains in joints protested more noticeably after every hard jolt in the tilting yard or every sudden pull on the reins during a patrol. And among the older knights in the castle, one could quietly observe subtle changes in how they moved. A slight careful stiffness in the gait, a barely noticeable favoring of one leg, perhaps from an old injury sustained years ago when a horse stumbled on loose stones, or from a knee that had absorbed too many hidden impacts behind the curved greave during countless sparring bouts. Yet none of these men ever spoke openly or complained about such things, because the ancient code of chivalry they had all sworn to uphold demanded not only raw courage and skill in the rare moments of open battle, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, a calm, stoic, silent endurance in every ordinary moment of life, great or small. And to voice discomfort over mere daily wear and tear would have been seen as a weakness unbecoming of a true knight. So these accumulated sufferings were carried quietly and alone, sometimes acknowledged only in a brief, knowing glance exchanged between two graying veterans as they slowly lowered themselves onto a bench after a particularly long day, or in the way they might unconsciously roll a sore shoulder when they thought no one was watching. The mind, too, bore its own gentle but constant burdens that added yet another quiet layer to the overall weariness. For although full-scale battles were not an everyday occurrence for most knights serving in peacetime castles, the ever-present possibility of sudden war, border raid, or nighttime surprise attack kept a low, almost imperceptible tension humming just beneath the surface of thought, like the distant, muffled beat of a war drum carried on the wind from far away. Never loud enough to demand full attention, yet never completely silent either. And memories of past violence, those rare but vivid days of chaos and danger, lingered softly in the background like shadows lingering in the corners of a dimly lit hall long after the torches have been lit. The sharp, ringing clash of hardened steel against steel, the panicked and heart-rending cries of wounded war horses collapsing beneath their riders, the heavy, sickening thud of a close comrade falling face down into thick mud, never to rise again. The sharp metallic smell of fresh blood mixing with the churned earth and sweat of battle, these images and sounds sometimes returned unbidden during the quiet hours just before sleep, replaying gently yet clearly enough to tighten the chest for a moment, quicken the breath, or cause the hands to clench briefly beneath the wool blanket, making truly deep and restorative rest even more difficult to achieve on those particular nights. And even during longer stretches of relative peace, there were always other soft, circling worries that refused to fully settle. The heavy and ongoing financial cost of properly maintaining fine plate armor, war horses, and all their expensive tack and feed, with constant small repairs needed for dents or rust spots, and occasional full replacement of pieces damaged beyond fixing. The serious responsibility of training the young squires entrusted to his care so that they might one day become worthy and honorable knights themselves without bringing shame to his name. The delicate and often exhausting politics of the Lord's court, where alliances shifted subtly, where a single misplaced word or forgotten gesture of respect during an audience could quietly lose favor and bring slow disgrace or reduced status. The ever-present distant fear that the dreaded plague might sweep through the nearby villages once again, or that a failed harvest might bring famine to the lands he had sworn to help protect, leaving hungry peasants restless and dangerous. And all these quiet concerns floated calmly, yet persistently at the edges of awareness, never sharp or urgent enough to require immediate action, yet constant enough to prevent the kind of complete mental peace and stillness that allows both body and mind to fully relax and sink into the deep, untroubled sleep that was so badly needed after every long and demanding day. Even the small pleasures and rare moments of relief that occasionally brightened a night's otherwise routine existence were almost always tempered or limited by some form of lingering discomfort or practical constraint. For a grand evening feast held in the great hall with flickering torchlight dancing on stone walls, minstrels playing soft lutes and harps in the corner, long tables laden with roasted venison or mutton still dripping rich fat, fresh-baked white bread still warm from the ovens, strong cheeses, and perhaps even imported spices or dried fruits for special occasions, was certainly a welcome and enjoyable change after a long cold day spent on patrol through dripping forests. But even then, the heavy wool tunic or doublet worn over skin that was still sensitive and marked from the day's tight padding and metal pressure often chafed gently in new places as he shifted on the bench, and drinking a little too much strong ale to ease sore muscles and quiet the circling thoughts inevitably left the head thick and foggy and the stomach slightly unsettled the following morning, when the young squire arrived early with the safe, calm-skated, familiar arming garments, and the long process of strapping on. The plates had to begin all over again, and the much-anticipated tournaments, those rare public moments of supposed glory and celebration when large crowds gathered on bright-colored stands. Ladies watched attentively from shaded pavilions. Trumpets sounded triumphantly, and banners fluttered proudly in the breeze, were in truth perhaps the most intense and taxing physical trials of all, for they required entire consecutive days of extreme and repeated exertion while wearing complete plate armor under either the hot summer sun that turned the steel into a furnace or in cold spring winds that found every tiny gap, charging again and again down the long wooden lists with heavy lance firmly couched, each thunderous impact against an opponent's painted shield sending powerful jarring shock waves through arm and shoulder and spine, exactly like repeated hammer blows, sweat pouring in steady, unending rivers inside every layer until garments clung coldly and every small movement felt slippery and twice as heavy. Breath coming shorter and more ragged inside the confined and humid space of the closed helmet, where exhaled air grew thick and warm and hard to draw anew. And afterward, when the final cheers gradually faded away, the prizes were ceremonially awarded, and the crowds began to disperse. The resulting bruises bloomed deep purple and tender beneath the skin in places padding could never fully protect. The overall exhaustion settled so completely that even walking back to the tent felt like wading through deep water, and full recovery now took many quiet days of moving slowly and carefully, sleeping lightly because every muscle protested gently with every turn beneath the blanket. Yet through every moment of it all, the knight was expected to smile politely, bow gracefully to the assembled lords and ladies and admiring crowds, and maintain at all times the calm, unbreakable mask of courtly strength and confidence, hiding every single ache, every wave of weariness, every small wince behind perfect ceremony and proud posture. As Sir Edmund gradually moved deeper into his later years, with gray beginning to touch his beard and temples, and the strength of youth no longer quite as quick to return after hard exertion, the daily sufferings did not suddenly worsen or grow dramatically more severe. They simply became even more deeply familiar and accepted, as natural and predictable as the slow turning of the seasons themselves or the regular ringing of the castle chapel bells calling the household to morning and evening prayer, and over time he quietly learned a few small, private ways to ease the worst of them wherever possible without ever drawing attention or appearing to seek special treatment. Requesting an extra thin layer of soft-washed linen to place beneath the thick arming doublet during the coldest winter months to reduce chafing, asking the castle steward for a slightly thicker and fresher straw mattress when the old one had grown too thin, lumpy, and permanently infested, taking a few precious minutes alone in the quiet armory or chapel alcove to slowly stretch sore shoulders and lower back, when no squire or fellow knight was nearby to observe, choosing whenever possible a calmer and better trained horse for routine long patrols in order to reduce the constant jarring motion in the saddle that wore so steadily on spine and hips, or quietly arranging with the laundress to have the padded garments and linen shirts washed a little more frequently, when the castle's schedule allowed warm water and time. But no matter how many of these small adjustments he made, they could never fully remove or escape the fundamental hardships, because those hardships were completely inseparable from the very nature and demands of knightly life, woven intrinsically into the honor, the purpose, the sworn oaths, and the identity that gave deep meaning to every heavy step taken in steel sabatons, every weary night spent on hard straw, every small, silent endurance offered without complaint, and in rare private moments of reflection, perhaps while sitting alone on a worn stone bench in the sheltered castle garden, watching the sun set slowly in soft oranges and pinks behind distant rolling hills, or while gazing quietly into the dying embers of the great hall fire long after most of the household had retired, Sir Edmund understood with calm acceptance that the shining, romantic glory so often sung by traveling minstrels and beautifully illuminated in precious manuscript pages always came at this hidden, patient, and largely invisible cost, a cost not paid dramatically in one single heroic sacrifice upon a blood-soaked battlefield, but instead paid gradually and faithfully in thousands upon thousands of small, quiet, uncelebrated moments of endurance repeated faithfully day after day, week after week, year after year, until both body and mind carried the gentle, permanent marks of a lifetime spent in devoted, honorable, and often uncomfortable service. And now, as our long, slow, and very gentle journey through the hidden daily world of a medieval knight finally draws peacefully and completely to its close, you may find yourself noticing without any effort at all how much more deeply relaxed your own body has become during this quiet time, how your arms and legs feel heavier and more pleasantly sunk into the soft support of your mattress or chair, how your shoulders have fully softened and released any lingering tightness, how your breathing has naturally slowed to a calm, even, unhurried rhythm that flows gently in and out all on its own, deeper and slower with each quiet exhale, how the comfortable darkness or dim light of your room feels completely safe and welcoming around you, like the gentlest and warmest embrace imaginable, and there is truly, absolutely nothing left that needs to be done tonight. Nothing at all left to think about or plan or remember or worry over even slightly, because the slow, soothing words of this long story have patiently carried you all the way here, washing softly and repeatedly over your mind like warm waves lapping again and again at a quiet shore, softening every remaining thought, loosening and releasing every last trace of tension from every muscle and every corner of your being. And now the story very kindly and gently releases you completely, allowing you to drift freely and naturally onward into the deep, peaceful, restorative sleep that has been waiting so patiently for you all this time, drawing closer and closer now with every slow, calm breath, closer with every soft exhale, until you feel yourself simply letting go entirely, sinking deeper and deeper, resting more fully and completely than you have in a long while, drifting safely and effortlessly into long hours of truly refreshing, dreamless, healing sleep that will leave you feeling wonderfully rested and renewed when soft morning light eventually arrives. Good night. Sleep deeply now. Rest completely and perfectly. All is well.